In Korea, a jacket bearing the Kodak logo is a fashion statement. But the American company behind that brand was so broken that in 2012, it filed for Chapter 11 protection, buried under $6.75 billion in liabilities. It only survived by performing a radical amputation, selling its pioneering digital imaging patent portfolio for just $527 million to pay off creditors. So how does a hollowed-out industrial giant, stripped of its core innovation, re-emerge as a profitable brand? This isn't a story of a triumphant return. It's the story of a profitable ghost. To understand how the ghost learned to make money, you first have to witness the death of the body, a collapse that saw revenue fall from a peak of $13.3 billion into financial ruin, forcing a reinvention that few saw coming. The anatomy of a corporate collapse is written in numbers. Between 2003 and 2011, Kodak's revenue was effectively severed, falling from $13.3 billion to $6 billion. Not a decline, an amputation. This was not a market correction. It was a complete systems failure, a multi-decade inability to redeploy its immense chemical and imaging expertise into any viable future. The inertia of the legacy film business had become a gravitational force, pulling the entire organization into a financial black hole. The human cost was staggering. The company's global workforce was dismantled, shrinking from 63,900 employees to a core of just 17,000. Not downsizing, an evacuation of an entire industrial civilization. By the time Kodak formally entered Chapter 11 bankruptcy, its balance sheet confirmed the diagnosis: $6.75 billion in liabilities against only $5.1 billion in assets. Terminal insolvency. The company was worth more dead than alive. Yet this apocalypse was not unique to Kodak. Across the Pacific, its primary competitor, Fujifilm, stood on the same precipice. In the year 2000, film products accounted for 70% of Fujifilm's total profits. Its business model was equally dependent on a dying technology. Its factories faced the same obsolescence. Its distribution channels, the same irrelevance. Both giants were staring at identical data, identical market signals, identical existential deadlines. The two companies shared a diagnosis, but their treatments would diverge completely. While Kodak's leadership clung to the past, paralyzed by the scale of the crisis, Fujifilm was about to make a decision so ruthless it would redefine the physics of the entire company. The inflection point wasn't a new product. It was a cold, strategic calculation. Fujifilm's leadership made a choice so ruthless it redefined the company's physics. The profitable film division was no longer the identity. It was the fuel, a disposable rocket stage to finance a radical escape. The mission was not to save the legacy, it was to harvest it. To treat a century of corporate history not as a sacred trust, but as a depreciating asset on the balance sheet. This mental model, liquidating your past to buy a future, was the precise insight Kodak's leaders could not grasp. One company fought to protect its history, the other sold it for parts. This was not a tentative experiment. Over the next 15 years, Fujifilm committed over $10 billion to a new corporate anchor in healthcare and biologics, a sum deployed to build a future. Contrast that with Kodak, which during its bankruptcy was forced to auction its crown jewels, its digital imaging patent portfolio, for just $527 million. One was investing, the other was selling to pay its debts. The strategic depth of this pivot lay in a capabilities bridge. Fujifilm's leadership understood their most valuable asset wasn't a logo, it was chemistry. Their mastery of preventing oxidation in photographs was a direct pipeline to creating antioxidant cosmetics. Their deep expertise in precision materials engineering was the foundation for a bold expansion into pharmaceutical manufacturing and drug discovery. It was an alchemical turn, transforming decades of obsolete knowledge into cutting-edge science. This was the intellectual lever that unlocked the pivot. But an insight is worthless without execution. A decision of this magnitude demanded a structural overhaul so complete it would tear the old company apart before a new one could be born. The strategic blueprint was translated into steel and glass. In a new US-based manufacturing hub, Fujifilm physically manifested its pivot, quadrupling its production capacity for iPS cell-based therapies. This was not merely diversification, it was the creation of a new industrial core. The hum of bioreactors replaced the whir of film rollers. The company was building a contract development and manufacturing organization, or CDMO, positioning itself as the foundational manufacturing partner for the entire emerging biologics industry. It was a structural shift, repurposing its deep expertise in high-precision chemical manufacturing, from film coatings to cell cultures. Fujifilm was no longer just a product company. It was becoming a critical piece of infrastructure for the future of medicine. By contrast, Kodak's post-bankruptcy mechanism was a study in capital-light survival. Its most celebrated new revenue stream was brand licensing, a clever tactic generating $23 million in revenue and $20 million in operating profit. Against the company's total revenue of $1.069 billion, a rounding error, this was a high-margin footnote, not a new engine. The strategy required no new factories, no deep R&D. It simply monetized the ghost of its former brand. One company was building the complex, high-capital infrastructure for its next 100 years. The other was licensing its logo for apparel. The operational rebuild was complete, creating two fundamentally different corporate machines. Now came the real test. Did the numbers prove this expensive, painful pivot was more than just another way to survive? The results of the pivot were not ambiguous. While Kodak emerged from bankruptcy with a projected equity value of just $441 million, a ghost of its former Titanic self, Fujifilm, was reporting record sales and record profits. The financial divergence was absolute. One company had navigated the storm and emerged stronger, a diversified technology and healthcare conglomerate. The other survived as a streamlined commercial imaging business. Its 2025 revenue of $1.069 billion, a distant echo of its former $13.3 billion peak. The ultimate consequence of this transformation extends beyond the balance sheet. Fujifilm's chemical expertise, once used for photographic film, now fuels a therapeutics pipeline targeting some of humanity's most intractable diseases: Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancers. It weaponized its core competency, turning a tool for capturing memories into one that could potentially extend them. This is the final stage of the V-shaped recovery, not just returning to profitability, but creating a new identity with a more profound market purpose. A generational shift from consumer goods to life sciences. This does not render Kodak's survival a failure. Its brand licensing model, a high-margin footnote generating $23 million in revenue, is a valid, capital-light strategy for monetizing a legacy asset. It requires no new factories, no deep R&D. But the two outcomes represent fundamentally different classes of victory. Kodak's story is one of persistence. Fujifilm's is one of reinvention. The contrast provides the most valuable lesson. This was not a story of luck, market timing, or cultural exceptionalism. It was the result of a deliberate, repeatable framework. Here it is. The lesson is not innovate or die. That's a bumper sticker. The reality is a precise, repeatable mechanism, the Anti-Diversification Playbook. Survival is not about placing scattered bets across a dozen new ventures. It is a disciplined, cold-eyed audit of a single latent capability and redeploying it with total commitment. This is the capability bridge framework. You identify your deepest, most defensible technical asset, and you build a bridge from your collapsing industry to a new, high-growth market where that asset becomes an unassailable moat. Think of it as a corporate phoenix. The ashes of the old must nourish the singular flame of the new. Fujifilm's bridge was its mastery of chemistry. Kodak's was its brand. The financial outcomes codify this choice. Kodak sold its core digital patent portfolio for $527 million, a defensive liquidation, a transaction to fund a smaller existence. Fujifilm, conversely, executed an offensive redeployment, investing over $10 billion to build an entirely new industrial core in healthcare. One company monetized its past to survive the present. The other weaponized its core competency to conquer the future. The transferable rule is stark. In a platform shift, your most valuable asset is not your brand or your distribution network. It is your unique, hard-won technical IP. The goal is not to sell it off in a fire sale. It is to aim it at a bigger, more valuable problem. This framework strips away the ambiguity of corporate transformation, leaving one single question. It is a question that should keep every founder and strategist up at night. What is the one core capability inside your organization that, if aimed at a completely different market, could unlock an entirely new future?
Learn the next winning strategy.